Firstly, I'd just like to say a really big thank you to everyone who commented on the last video. I really appreciate your feedback, and it's really great to have this conversation with people who disagree with my position. I think it's a really important conversation, a really interesting conversation to have. And if you are interested in going further with that conversation, then please consider subscribing so we can have more of a back and forth. I have replied to those comments in text, but I just wanted to make a quick video to address a few of the points in a little more detail than I did in those short comments. So that being said, again, thank you to everyone who commented, and I'll get into some of these refutations. So the first thing I would say is that there was a comment made that Matt is not being arrogant because he's not claiming making a positive claim that God does not exist. And that's true. He absolutely doesn't, and I don't think I made that case in my last video. I think I was pretty careful not to say that because I don't want to straw man Matt, and it's absolutely, when he's pushed on the topic, he clearly says that ultimately he does not know if God exists or not, but he's very clearly much more towards the end of saying that there's probably not a God than there probably is a God. And nothing wrong with that, but I just think that the arrogance comes into it because of the tone, his attitude, the general disrespect, like I said, calling people stupid, calling people idiots. He has a visible disdain for people who do believe in a God. And it's that disdain and that disrespect that I find arrogant, because ultimately, or when I say do believe, let's say someone was like him, 99% sure that there was a God. He has a real disdain for that position. And I think that is arrogant. That's in my opinion, the very definition of arrogance, which is for no objective, justifiable reason, seeing your position or yourself as superior to others. And I just think that completely fits the definition of being arrogant, frankly. So as I said, I don't think he's making that positive claim, but I definitely do think he's being arrogant about his position and how he ranks his position compared to others. So thanks again, John, for that comment. Now we had another one here from Vinny. So couple of different points in this one. First of all, the first comment really goes into, well, can you disprove theism in general? There's theism lacks a rigorous definition, and therefore you can't make testable predictions and models about it, and you can't really can't investigate it with a scientific method. In some ways I agree with this, in some ways I disagree with this, and I want to get into the topic of metaphysics and the relationship to science and the scientific process in a lot more detail in future videos. So I'm not going to go really deep into this, but I will say, look at my last video where I do talk about this a little bit, the idea that if there is a metaphysical reality, it has to manifest itself in the physical world. And in that way, there will always be a, quote, scientific or physical or rational explanation for anything that happens in the physical universe. And therefore there will always be that explanation, even if it was caused by a metaphysical cause. In my last video, I used the example, let's say God created new eyes for someone and, just they magically appeared out of the vacuum of space. Well, there's still a complete physical description of those atoms appearing and them coalescing and chemical reactions and all this stuff. There's still a physical description, at the very least, if not explanation, of what happened. So even if something has a metaphysical cause that is, essentially being caused from something that's maybe outside the universe, or that sort of thing, outside of the natural, what we consider the natural laws of physics, it will still always have a physical description. So I think that there is some overlapping there between the physical world and the metaphysical, if it does indeed exist. And I will get into how we might probe that and how we might investigate that link in some future videos. And that's a topic that really interests me, and I have a lot of thoughts on that. So stay tuned for more videos on that topic. They also made another point at the end of their comment, which is that I'll just read it out. It says, yes, a god that uses magic to do anything can do whatever it wants. However, claiming this about God moves this deity into a realm of unfalsifiability, making the concept essentially useless. Now, whether or not you certainly can create definitions of God that are unfalsifiable. I completely agree with that. But I do disagree with the premise that any claim is, or any concept, as they say, that is unfalsifiable is essentially useless. And I just came up off the top of my head with a few claims which I think are actually very useful, and most atheists would probably argue that these sort of concepts and these sort of claims are actually the foundation of the scientific method and how we understand the universe in scientific terms. So, for example, the claim, the world around you is logically consistent. The claim, the laws of physics are temporally and spatially universal. And the claim, cause must always precede effect, are examples of claims that are the underpinning and basis of the scientific method, but they are also claims that are completely unfalsifiable. So I would definitely say that these claims and believing these claims and acting as though these claims are true can definitely be very useful in science and in our understanding of the physical world. But they are unfalsifiable. So I do completely disagree with the premise that if a concept is unfalsifiable, it is essentially useless. I think that those three counter examples, I mean, you could honestly keep going with more and more examples, but I think those three are pretty foundational to scientific understanding. So the last one was a comment from Krell Furnace. And again, they sort of say that I'm labeling skepticism itself as arrogant, and I definitely don't think that. I consider myself a skeptic. Arrogance is about an attitude. It's not about a position. You can have the position that Matt has, and not be arrogant about it. You can have the position that you're 99% confident that God does not exist, and not be arrogant about how you treat other people and how you interact with others and discuss other people's point of view. The arrogance comes from your level of superiority that you think you have over other people. And the point I was making is that there's no objective reason to think that, based on your own human logic and understanding and perception of the world, that your position on whether there is a God or is not a God, based on that, is essentially arrogant. It's really the mirror image of the people who say, I have this belief in faith, and I have this belief in faith and faith alone, and you can justify anything through faith. Well, you can justify just about anything through some sort of, in my opinion, it just seems silly that, God would do this or not do this, or, your sort of human lens that you're seeing the world through, using that to justify your position is really no better, in my opinion. So, I mean, it doesn't mean you can't do that. If that's how you want to, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. That in itself is not arrogant. But it's the attitude and the lack of humility, um, and not being humble in what you don't know, and treating other people who have a different opinion for really, no worse reasons, poorly, and that's what makes you arrogant. That's what I think, at least. Now, they also said that the argument I made in my video essentially boils down to this quote, that them talking about me, it's that I believe in something that I can't define and has properties that I can't identify and does or maybe does not do things that I don't know. And he says Dillahunty would point out that this can't convince anyone of anything, and how is that arrogant? And I would totally agree that claim there, if that was the argument I made, yeah, that's not convincing of anything. That doesn't. I even made that a point about this in my first video that I made about the metaphysics. Can it be real? That if this is your definition of the metaphysical or of God, is something that is essentially just outside of our observable universe, that is a completely impotent and useless definition. So I do agree with that, but if you go back and watch my the last video again, you'll see that I didn't make a single claim or statement about my beliefs. And I will absolutely get to what I believe about these things in future videos. But I did not make that any claim about anything that I believe. So I think there maybe is a little bit of projection here, maybe projecting other people's arguments onto me. Perhaps simply because I'm taking a critical view of an atheist, you assume that I would make, that I have beliefs that are typical of a theist, potentially. I don't know. I'm just speculating here, but I definitely didn't make that argument. In fact, I didn't, as I said, state any of my beliefs in that video. So maybe just check that out again and have a think about it. Yeah, I'll just restate that. Yeah, I don't think that it would be arrogant to say that position is not convincing of anything. It's not my position, and I think that Matt is being arrogant because, from his perspective, he sees God's, as Christians define, or even a more general definition, but he sees God's actions, purported actions, as illogical or immoral. And I think it's arrogant to make this determination, given how far removed we are as humans from a being that has the power to create the universe, essentially. I think that is arrogant to say that we could, with any certainty, put ourselves into the mindset of such a being and say that their behavior is illogical, immoral, for whatever reason. I think that, you certainly can try and do this from a thought experiment sort of point of view, and it's useful to do in that respect. But yeah, I mean, you can't, I think, have any certainty about that type of thought experiment, and certainly not the level of certainty that Matt has about his own reasoning that, God is an illogical, immoral idiot because he doesn't agree with what God is supposed to have done. I just think that's the height of arrogance, really, to think that you as a human being, if there was a God, that you would be able to put yourself in their shoes and and see the universe from their perspective when they literally created the universe. Yeah, pretty big separation there. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of these concepts in future videos. Like I said, I really want to go into the whole science and metaphysics thing some more. So yeah, please, as always, if you have any comments on what I've said, I love the feedback, and please consider subscribing for more videos. Thank you.